I'm a mortgage lender. I've been in mortgage lending for 24 years, and name of the show is Money and Impact. So deal with a lot of money, from first-time homebuyers trying to figure out where they're going to get money for their first house, to people figuring out should they refinance, should they not refinance, or all types of mortgage things. And then the other part of my show's title is Impact. And throughout the course of my life and career, I have been so lucky to have met people that have impacted me both personally and professionally. And hey, I got a show now, and today I am delighted to have Alizah Josette from Spearhead Pillow.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
I am delighted because I said to you when I asked you to do the show, will you come on the show? Because you are one of the most fascinating people that I've ever spoken to. Yeah,
Thank
and I'm not
you.
just saying that.
And same. I mean, I always love our conversations, and that's actually how I was looking at this coming on today. It's just a conversation with a friend, and I was really looking forward to it. So I'm glad to be here.
Me too. I mean, you did something that many people that may be watching this might be thinking of doing, saying, hey, you know what? I'm done with my 9 to 5. I've got this dream. And what gave you the guts to do that?
Honestly, it was my intuition. So I love that you use the word guts, because I always feel like I separate out my heart and my gut. So I think of my gut as where my intuition, my soul, my spirit, that astrological body, I feel like that's where that energy resides within me. And my heart is more my lived experience, my ego. And I always try to figure out what's leading me. And it was really just during one night, a deep meditation, that it came to me in my gut that I needed to invent this pillow, and that I needed to bring this to market, and that was my path in this life in order to contribute and give back to society.
What was the heart telling you at that moment? Because you said it was the gut that was telling you, but then
I think my heart, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think my heart really just wanted to stay in security. Like I said, I always think of that as more like where the ego, the lived experience lies for myself. Mm-hmm. And I had worked very hard in my career to work my way up to this top position in a prominent law firm. I was a paralegal for 17 years, and it took a long journey to get there. And so I think my heart was very scared as well of not having a paycheck and starting a business. It's all risk. But ultimately, I have made a choice that my heart and my gut need to work together within my body. So I try to give each of them a 50-50 control over the mind and body, so I'm all really united. And I have to say that usually the gut is right. If there's a difference there, some people may refer to it as their brain, their heart and their brain when they have tough decisions. For me, it's that intuition and that astrological connection, and it doesn't usually lead me astray. So I try to tend to follow that more.
I like how you put it where the heart is ego-centered. Now, is it ego-centered in the sense for you of, hey, I've done this before, or I have that confidence, or is it ego-centered where it's maybe holding on to an identity?
Yes.
Have you ever had that?
Yes, I feel like the holding on to an identity, absolutely. So I do think, personally, I believe in reincarnation. Yeah. So I think that my astrological body, that soul, spirit, gut, I think it's been around a few times. So it's actually a little bit wiser. It has more life experience, more lived experience. Mm-hmm. And I feel my heart has only the identity and experience of this one lifetime. And that holds a big string on us, obviously. This life that we're presently in is sometimes all-consuming, and so it's very easy to let the heart kind of run us, and how many people fall into their egos. But yeah, so for me, I do think the ego is more about your sense of identity and who you are in this lifetime.
You're a real spiritual person.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I know we were talking off camera about how that's led you, and that's led you to making a lot of decisions. And I think we spoke about the judgment versus opinion you had brought up.
Yeah.
Speak to that.
Well, I think for me, I'm always working on being less judgmental of myself and others, and more compassionate for myself and others. But I've had to really learn the difference between having an opinion and being judgmental, because they really are different. And I think sometimes from the outside, if you're looking at it very briefly, you can conflate the two and think they're actually on equal planes. But it's a lot of different language, ultimately, I think is what really separates the two. I think judgment is kind of wrapped up into negativity, whether it's negative self-talk or putting that on others and judging their actions in a negative way, versus an opinion, I think, is more even-keeled. It's not, there's no negative inference there, or negative terms that are used, or negative feelings or energy associated with an opinion. It's usually just a subjective or objective state of facts that you have determined within yourself. But there's the judgment, I think, it's when it's really negative. And I'm horrible with the negative self-talk sometimes in my inner dialogue. It's all filled with judgments, and that's why I'm always working on that. Instead of saying, you know, oh, I'm so stupid, I forgot this. It's like, oh, I made a mistake and I forgot this. Learning how to cut down that negative self-talk, I think, and those judgments is very important, that we need to do for ourselves and for others that we meet.
Yeah, I struggle with it a lot. And when it comes to others, in your reflection on it and in the ways that you've gone deep to figure out, like, hey, how can I not beat myself up? Have you ever looked at that lens of, why do I judge others?
Yes.
What was it for you when you did that?
Honestly, I think it was my childhood. I think it's surprising how much our upbringing impacts who we turn out to be. So I did not realize that until my mid-30s, that where my judgmental nature comes from is that I actually just have very judgmental parents. And that's how they communicate and how they speak and how they treated me, how they treated each other, other people, themselves. And so I think it's almost ingrained, those neural pathways. We have to try very hard to break the cycles of our upbringing. How about you? So you fall into that too. Where do you think your judgment has come from?
Hey, this is my show. No, I'm kidding.
Do you want to lay down on the couch?
It's always humor or self-deprecation for me. Those are my deflections. But I think for me, it came from a place of not coming from much and being made fun of. So a lot of times not having the right clothes or not living in the right spot, those would be things that would affect me, because my mother was that way. Even though we didn't have a lot, she always had to look good, and and that was something that she would judge others. You know, we'd go to church and she'd be judging people, or at the store, look at what they have on. And it made appearance and those things that I would judge myself on. Other things I would judge myself on was just being able to figure things out. I was not a good student, and had a lot of issues, and those are things that I'm still working on it as a 50-year-old. There's still that inner child that I'm working on falling in love with and having compassion for, because that's a version of me, of saying, like, hey, that's a part of me that made that, and there's a reason for being in this seat, whatever that seat may be. So it was learning that compassion and being compassionate to my younger self. Have you learned about that? Like any, there's a novel that I listened to on Audible. It's called Radical Acceptance, about just radically accepting things, and the whole thing behind the meaning of the word radical. It's not in the sense of like some crazy lunatic. It's more in the sense of I'm probably messing up the word, but
like out of the box. Like radical meaning just not standard.
Or like an amazing acceptance of something, and I'm probably butchering the dang thing right now, but it was that, and just accepting. Like, hey, it may be a crappy day. It is. And just accepting it.
I work on that when it comes to my feelings.
Really?
What I have a hard time, not just for myself, but my life partner, Fred, when he is a little off and feeling something, when I'm a little off and feeling something, just basically when it's someone who's very close to me, I sense it right away. And for me, I just want to resolve it. It's like, well, let's analyze this. Let's dig in. Why is your energy off? Why am I feeling this way? And I want to resolve it and get back to this good inner peace, loving place as quickly as possible. And what I've really had to learn lately is just accepting the feeling, not analyzing it, just being okay with feeling that way or letting him feel that way and be in a bad place. And just know that it will blow over. It's a feeling. We're experiencing it, and I don't necessarily need to snuff it out. I just need to accept it and be comfortable and okay with some sort of adverse feeling just existing. And so I struggle with that because it's not my nature.
Were you a fixer as a kid, or did you have like a fixer around you, or like a people pleaser?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, very much a people pleaser.
Yeah.
I think so many of us are. And so I don't know if necessarily that's where that comes from, if that's the same personality trait, but I can definitely connect those two. Yeah, so perhaps.
Have you ever had times, in the relationship, whether it be with Fred or whether it be in a business relationship, where, maybe wanting to get to that root cause of, hey, your energy's off or whatever, where it's created any type of friction?
Yes. Absolutely, and especially with my romantic relationship with my life partner, Fred, because he likes to reflect by himself for extended periods of time. And so he wants about like 48 hours to contemplate something so he knows exactly why he's feeling it. He's really done a deep dive on himself before we can discuss it together. And like I said, I don't normally, that's not my MO.
Yeah.
I will wake up in the morning and sense that something is off and want to dig right in. It's like, let's put off work, let's put off let's figure out, what's going on. And sometimes that can be off-putting and not helpful necessarily. So it does cause some friction, and that's why I know I have to work on it.
Aren't we all a work in progress?
All the time,
Yeah.
And I find that that's the beauty of life, is we should never be stagnant. We should constantly be evolving. So are you still a people pleaser yourself? And
in one regard, I think I was, but in another regard, I don't think I've really ever been. I think I've been an extremely selfish person, and I've learned that I am. Not learned, I know that I am. And I also am being intentional about not being that.
How so? Do you feel that you were selfish?
Because a lot of times it's about me. It's about me in my relationship and in my work life, and that a lot of times is my first thought. And
that's very fascinating, because I would not think that a truly person who has the trait of selfishness has also the ability to recognize that. Do you know what you would think?
I guess I'm not a psychopath or a sociopath, right?
Right? Yeah, I don't have a personality disorder, but maybe. I
In
mean,
the DSM handbook. Yeah.
But isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Because I would not think that the ability to have that self-awareness could coexist with such a trait, which leads me to question and be like, well, why? How do you think you're selfish? Because
my wife tells me all the time. Well, I think it's, you're very evolved. You're very self-aware. You're like extremely spiritual, extremely fascinating, and you've done a lot of work. And I think when people do the work is when you do realize that you do have these flaws. Like, none of us is
Right.
perfect, but I think that's the messiness and the beauty of life, is that you can get out there with all your mixed up pieces and be able to connect with someone that's just as mixed up as well, and be able to love all those parts, whatever those may be, whether it be we all have those, like the secret self and the outer self and the shame and all that. And, I think in working on that, and I'm talking way too much for my show.
no,
I knew we would
I
do this.
love it.
I think that in doing that, it's allowed me to see, like, wow, you're still evolving, you're never done, and just be aware of it. Be aware when that's coming out. And for me, a lot of times, it's not being a good team player of, wanting to get whatever done I need to get done and not worrying about someone else, and that's not right. And I've learned that, okay, I've got to be better in the sandbox as a coworker and whatnot.
And isn't that the purpose of life? So I do think about reincarnation. And so I think that what karma is the traumatic experiences that we take with us from this life, but also the lessons we haven't learned. And so it's a constant striving to figure out what those flaws are within us, because you're right, we all have them and have them in spades. But that is the purpose of why we're here, in my opinion, obviously, which, as I said, is opinion, not a judgment.
Yep.
So, but I do feel that way, is that we need time to self-reflect and grow that self-awareness and figure out our flaws. And how do we become that ideal version of ourselves that we want to be? That is where ultimate happiness lies. And so I think good for you. Sitting down and doing the work is kind of why we're here.
What drew you to reincarnation? Was it just a natural curiosity about it, or did you have an experience?
So to be honest, I've just really studied spirituality for many years now. So I've read countless books.
Brian Weiss?
No, tell me.
I saw him live.
Who's Brian Weiss?
He is a therapist.
Okay.
And I really hope I'm saying his name properly. We were able to see him at the Omega Institute in New York.
Oh.
And a business partner had given me a book by him. And
Okay.
he was a therapist. That it happened during a therapy session that he was recording, where one of his patients regressed to
Oh,
a
so like
past
Michael
life.
Newton.
I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, so Dr. Michael Newton is supposed to be the first therapist that did that went to
Okay.
regression of past lives. And he has a couple books, which I have read. So I haven't read Brian Weiss, but I'll look him
Okay.
up. But honestly, when I read Michael Newton's, his first book, I liked it. It was good because I had already come to a lot of those conclusions on my own, in my own meditations and contemplations. So when I was reading them, it was like reinforcing, versus if I had read it for the first time in this book, I think I would have been judgmental and I would have been like, this is BS, and just very disregarded it. His second book, I got it's like 400 pages, and I only got a couple tidbits out of it that I really took with me. But that's worth it. To be honest, a lot of the spiritual books I read are by monks or sages, just historical figures. And if I can get a few tidbits out of them, that's usually a good book, and that's worth it. So I definitely recommend the Michael Newton books, even though I take them all with a grain of salt personally, because I like to come up with my own opinions on these things, what comes to me in my intuition versus what is someone else telling me that this is the way it is. But he's fascinating. So he's an institution where he puts people into regressions. I don't think he's doing it anymore. I think he's deceased now. And but he's trained a couple people, and I did meet with one of them that studied with him for about like 20 years or something. And
Did they take you through a regression?
it didn't work for me.
Oh, why?
So I have trouble visualizing.
Okay.
So I'm one of those people that if you say like visualize, an apple, I can do it intentionally, but I can't unintentionally visualize inside my head. And so hypnotism is very difficult for me because it's all about, well, tell me what you're seeing. And that's not how my brain works. I can hear things. I'm very good at hearing things unintentionally. That's how I daydream. But I don't have visions. And so it didn't work. I did not go under. Have you ever been hypnotized?
No.
Okay.
I pretended I was hypnotized in high school with the Frank Santos. He was the X-rated or R-rated, not X-rated, R-rated hypnotist that would do the club circuit back in the 90s.
Oh, you
So
pretended?
I pretended.
What did you do for an R-rated?
I don't remember what I did.
You just don't want to say it on camera, but this is going to be a conversation that we're going to have when this goes off. I need to know what young Suzanne did.
I'll give you the first copy of the book. And then when we went to the Omega Institute, I dragged my wife there. I wanted to go so bad. And we did a regression thing amongst a room full of people. and all I saw was the back of my eyes.
Yeah.
My wife had an experience.
Really?
And I dragged her there. She didn't want to
Yeah.
go. She's like, I can't believe you're taking me to this stupid thing. You know, the whole ride there, she was pouty.
Yeah.
And she had an experience and saw, and it was almost like a collective experience because others in the room were seeing this little boy. And for her, the little boy represented her dad when he was some version of her dad.
Wow.
So I don't know. I think I wanted the experience so bad, so that's why I was like, "Oh, did you have an experience?"
Yeah.
And maybe I have the same thing as you. And I think I'm visual, but maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually didn't know it until recently. I read an article about, like, they have a word for people who are like me, maybe like you, that can't unintentionally visualize. And I'm sure there's people watching who are screaming this word at the TV, and I'm sorry that I can't hear it. But they did it with the pink elephant test, where they're like, don't imagine a pink elephant, and then how many people, unintentionally do. And for me, I can imagine a pink elephant, but I have to force myself to. It has to be very planned, like I am trying to do this now. I can't just have an image pop up into my head. And so maybe there's ways to hypnotize someone like me, but the person I went to go see, it didn't work. And that's okay. I don't really need that, to be honest. A big part of me believes in reincarnation, not just because of everything that I've read for so many years, but it also just makes the most sense to me. And I have meditated nearly every day for almost a decade now. So I was going to say it says 27, I'm almost 37. So it's literally been almost a decade where I've meditated nearly every day. And so I'm really in tuned, I believe, with my astrological body. And so for me, it just seems very understandable that that's where my belief system ends up.
When you talk about your astrological body, what is that? Is that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, or what do you mean?
Well, I think that's what we could call the soul or the spirit. I believe that is probably some sort of waves of energy that go along vibrations, so such as like musical notes. I think that's probably maybe what a soul is. So I call it my astrological body because I have no real idea. But that's what I'm pondering currently. I mean, I'm always evolving in what I believe and think because it's very influenced based upon what I'm currently reading, because I'm always contemplating what I'm reading. And but I am pretty sure that it has something to do with energy, higher planes of consciousness, so this energy that has consciousness, so we could call that intelligent energy, which I don't love that term, but how it goes on these sort of vibrational sound waves.
And have you ever had an experience where, whether it be out and about, and you're out and about promoting the pillow and telling people about what you've invented, that you meet someone and it's just like instant? And you feel like, I know them. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And
what do you think that is?
I can't say.
You haven't
but
pondered that? Like, you never thought, like, maybe
I do think that we go into lives together with people, and I do think that we have unfinished business with some souls as well, and so maybe we, reconnect with them. So it's really hard to know where that connection, that spark comes from, but absolutely it could be a past life. I don't disregard that theory. Yeah.
And are these things that you'll bring up to Fred, or how's Fred on the spiritual plane with you?
Well, when we were friends, my whole plan in life, I heard that I was born to help people. That I knew that since I was about 3 years old, that I was put on this planet to help others. And yes, at 3 years old, I remember thinking this. And I dedicated my whole life to that throughout my life. So from single digits on, it's really just been about contributing and helping others. And by the time I met Fred, my plan was actually to go through with my business, contribute as much as possible monetarily to society, and then I was going to go be a monk. I just wanted to live in a hermitage and spend my days in silence, doing community service and meditating. I do still believe that's the ideal life. I think I've lived that way many lifetimes before. But I'm here now for a purpose. And so when Fred and I were friends, I wouldn't share a lot of things with him. Also because I didn't talk as much. I wasn't as in tuned with the ego. I was very much into the spirit. And so it always felt like I had to put on the coat of Alizah. I once heard a sage describe it that way, that the personality is like a coat. It's your coat. It smells like you. It's familiar. You like it. However, it's summer inside and you just don't need a coat on. And so I had a really difficult time when we decided to become romantically involved. I then had to go very much into the ego because I had to share with him who I was, my life experience and my beliefs. And I used to keep my meditations to myself, and I wouldn't share with him any sort of insights I had. But now we've been together for a long time, and over time he would not be comfortable with that I would tell him so many things, but that I would keep these sort of realizations or thoughts to myself. So now, yes, I share with him when I have these sort of breakthrough insights or things that I'm contemplating. I share them with him, and I appreciate him going on that crazy journey with me, because that's how it feels. It's very out there, and he just takes it with a grain of salt, and he's not exactly where I am, but he doesn't mind talking about it with me and discussing these thoughts that I have sometimes.
In doing this practice for the past decade or so, do you have a set time that you do it, or is it as you feel it's needed throughout the day?
So I used to have a set time back when I had a 9 to 5. It was very easy. I had a lovely little routine. I would dance for a half hour, then do my breathing work, and then meditate for 2 to 3 hours and go to bed. I was single. I didn't have children or a spouse, so it was very easy to live this nightly routine. Now things are different. I run a business, and the workload never stops, and I do live with Fred. And so now I just try to do it whenever I can. So that might be middle of the day now. So there's really no more set time. It just depends on where does it fit in this particular day. Do you meditate?
I do, not as much as you do. I use 10% Happier. And,
oh, okay, yeah.
It's an app that was created by Dan Harris, and I'll do anywhere between a 10 to a 20 minute, at least 1 to 4 times a week.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
It's
absolutely. Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, I am so glad that you said yes. And for more info on today's guest, keep an eye out on the credits. And this is Money and Impact, and I'm Suzanne Caldeira. Thanks.